Srivijaya, the forgotten maritime empire of Southeast Asia, before the rise of Angkor or Majapahit, before even the Khmer or the Thai ruled vast kingdoms, there was Srivijaya, a maritime empire so vast, so wealthy, and so powerful that for centuries it controlled the lifeblood of Asian trade. And yet, today, few remember its name. What happened to Srivijaya? How did it rise from the jungles of Sumatra to command the oceans, and why did it vanish into obscurity? This is the untold story of Southeast Asia's greatest sea empire, Chapter 1, The World Before Srivijaya. To understand Srivijaya, we must go further back, to the early centuries of the Common Era. At that time, the region was dominated by a network of port cities and early kingdoms like Funan and Chenla in mainland Southeast Asia, and local chieftains scattered across the Indonesian archipelago. Indian influence had already reached the region, bringing Sanskrit, Hinduism, Buddhism, and new forms of governance. Trade between India and China flowed along the maritime routes, but control over these waters remained fragmented. There was no single power unifying the sea lanes. That would soon change. Chapter 2, The Rise of Srivijaya. Srivijaya emerged in the late 7th century CE, centered around Palembang on the island of Sumatra. The Kedukan Bukit inscription, dated 683 CE, tells us of a king named Dapunta Hyang Sri Jayanasa, who led a sacred military expedition, or Siddhayatra, commanding 20,000 men by land and sea. His goal was clear: to consolidate control over strategic river mouths and maritime routes. Palembang was no accident. Its position near the Musi River gave access to the Strait of Malacca, the most important trade choke point in Asia. Control the strait, and you control the flow of goods between China and India. Over the next decades, Srivijaya expanded rapidly, absorbing smaller coastal polities and establishing outposts in Bangka, Jambi, and even as far as Ligor, Nakhon Si Thammarat in modern Thailand. It was becoming more than a kingdom. It was becoming an empire. Chapter 3, A Thalassocracy, Rule of the Seas. Unlike land empires with armies and borders, Srivijaya was a thalassocracy, a sea-based empire built on maritime power. It didn't need to conquer territory inland. Instead, it controlled key ports and sea lanes, taxing traders and securing safe passage for merchants. It acted as a middleman in global trade. Gold, camphor, resins, forest products, and spices flowed out of the archipelago, while silk, ceramics, and ironware came from China, and cotton textiles and glassware from India. Arab traders even referred to the region as Zabag, marveling at its wealth. Srivijaya's ports were multicultural melting pots. Chinese, Tamil, Arab, Malay, and Javanese merchants mingled in marketplaces, temples, and dockyards. This was not just an empire of power, but of exchange. Chapter 4, Buddhist Beacon of the Sea. Srivijaya was not only a commercial empire, it was a spiritual one. It became a renowned center for Mahayana Buddhism in Southeast Asia. Pilgrims and monks from across Asia passed through its ports. The most famous was the Chinese monk Yi Jing, who stayed in Srivijaya for several years, starting in 670 Funan CE. He described a vibrant Buddhist culture, where monks studied Sanskrit grammar and Buddhist texts, before continuing their journey to India. Srivijaya even maintained strong ties with Nalanda University, the great Buddhist center in Bihar, India. The empire supported temples and monasteries, translating scriptures, and sending emissaries to the Tang court in China. The fusion of Buddhism and trade gave Srivijaya both material and spiritual power. Chapter 5, Chola Invasion, The Fall Begins. For over 300 years, Srivijaya was unrivaled. But by the 10th century, cracks began to appear. New regional powers like the Javanese kingdoms of Mataram and later Singasari challenged Srivijaya's dominance. Then came the greatest shock. In 1025 CE, Rajendra Chola I, the emperor of the powerful Chola dynasty in South India, launched a massive naval campaign. He targeted Srivijaya's ports, including Palembang, Kedah, and Tamberlinga. The Chola fleet ransacked key cities, captured the Srivijayan king, and broke the empire's monopoly on the sea. Though Srivijaya would survive in fragments for another century, its age of supremacy was over. Chapter 6: Decline and Legacy. In the centuries that followed, Srivijaya's power waned. The rise of Majapahit in Java, combined with increasing direct trade between China and India, bypassed the old intermediaries. By the 13th century, Srivijaya faded from inscriptions, and its once glorious capital of Palembang returned to jungle. Its story was all but lost to time. That is, until the early 20th century, when French scholar Georges Cadès pieced together Srivijaya's history from scattered inscriptions in Sumatra, Java, and Chinese chronicles. What emerged was a forgotten giant, a maritime superpower whose ships once ruled the waves. Today, Srivijaya's legacy endures in the maritime culture of Southeast Asia, in Buddhist art, and in the names of rivers, ports, and cities across Indonesia and Malaysia. Srivijaya was not just a kingdom. It was a gateway between worlds, a meeting place of religions, languages, and peoples. Its influence shaped the destiny of an entire region. In our next episode, we go even further back, to the mysterious kingdoms of Funan and Chenla, the forerunners of the Great Khmer Empire. Subscribe to Ancient Sea to rediscover the empires that time tried to erase.